Hi, I'm Bruce Hart. Just about to do an interview for Great North Wrestling. Enjoy the ride.
Okay, so of course you're Bruce Hart. You had a legendary professional wrestling career, and you were also the booker for Stampede Wrestling. You were in WWE, and you were also the trainer of a long list of people that went on to be legends. But I wanted to ask you first, who trained you for wrestling? Was it your father or?
Kind of a cumulative effort, I formerly was, my dad had a bunch of these old guys in the territory that were, some of them were old jobbers. Some old guy named Frank Butcher, and I remember Gordienko being down there a bit in those days, and a few other guys that maybe aren't even that well known. And then a big part of my learning was from just growing up in the business, and you were acutely aware of it. We were, because it's about sink or swim. If business wasn't good, you're acutely aware of what was getting over, who was getting over, what wasn't, why it wasn't or why it was, and all like that. So it gave you a lot of insight into applying that to the teaching. And when I first started training guys down in the dungeon, most of them were, in its own way it was good, because they were sort of like a clean sheet of paper with no smudges or preconceptions. So I'd get some of these younger guys like Davey Boy Smith or Chris Benoit or Brian Pillman or guys like that, and they hadn't been given any stuff by anyone else. They hadn't been taught the wrong way by somebody's uncle or some bullshit like that. So in that way, they were all pretty receptive, and they listened, and you're always trying to qualify anything you taught everyone with an explanation of why or rationale. And that's a big part of it.
What was the difference between your training and Stu's training?
It was a different era. When Stu was doing the dungeon type stuff, it was first and foremost to protect the ostensible integrity of the business, the quasi-legitimacy. So there was, you may have noticed, if you think of some of the promoters back in Stu's day, so many of them were these old shooter types, amateur wrestling based guys like Vern Gagne, Leroy McGurk, and Dory Funk Sr., and Ray Gunkel in Atlanta, and guys like that. So it was sort of obligatory to make them pay their dues, so to speak. So that entailed stretching them and all of that. That really didn't have that much to do with working, but it was about kind of protecting the supposed legitimacy or the whatever of the business. So they had to go through that dues paying, and then it was sort of from there. And the business was a little different then too, and there was less emphasis on high spots. And so I didn't necessarily agree. Stu and I weren't always on the same page as far as methodology. When I was kind of growing up in the 70s, my dad had a lot of these, sort of sedentary heel types that were kind of big and slower, but pretty serious. And for whatever reason, they weren't really setting the world on fire. I went to England in 77, and it was sort of a revelation for me. I saw a lot of these smaller guys that were pretty lively and dynamic and didn't do much punching or kicking or any of that stuff, but they were pretty dynamic. And that sort of made an impression on me. I came back from there, and when my dad let me take over the book, I brought some of the English guys that I had crossed paths with, who were just sort of young neophytes, wanting to get into North America, like Tom Billington, alias Dynamite Kid, and Davey Boy Smith, and some of them. And I had sort of seen the English style, but I kind of tried to adapt the English style and instill in Dynamite and Davey and guys like that the North American style. So it was kind of like the best of both worlds. And right around that same time, I had a lot of Japanese guys trying to come in. And the Japanese had a pretty good style as far as athleticism and amateur wrestling base, and they weren't big on ring psychology. And they were kind of what we used to call stone face, so they didn't have that kind of showbiz. So I kind of incorporated, a bit of the Japanese and a bit of the British. And then we had a few guys around that time that were sort of not into the wrestling so much, but they had a lot of personality, guys like Honky Tonk, David Schultz.
Did you come up with Honky Tonk Man's name? There's always been a rumor about that.
I think we came up with that kind of jointly. I remember I had David Schultz in, who was, he had sort of got established with us, and he told me he had a friend named Wayne Ferris down in Tennessee that he asked if we could bring him in, and I said, sure, I think in talking to Schultz, and we kind of came up with this kind of character, and so the name sort of spun off from that.
And speaking of Schultz, he's always known as an eccentric individual. Do you have any story that would kind of highlight that part of him from
Schultz.
his days in Stampede?
I remember one time Schultz, there was some CBC documentary up, and they wanted to do a kind of they made out like they wanted to do a complimentary documentary on Stampede Wrestling, and it was kind of like intrigued that it was such a big thing in Canada, and almost, how could a bunch of hicks out in Western Canada come up with something as compelling as that? And but I think their intent was more to do a precursor of the John Stossel 2020 or whatever the hell. And this guy, I can't remember what his name was. I think it was named Tom Alderman or something. He started going down the same road as John Stossel did about 4 or 5 years later, and I think we were doing an interview in Red Deer, and I think my dad was there, and Schultz was about that far from doing the same to this guy as he did to John Stossel later on, kind of. But
was he one of the tougher characters that came through?
I think Dave was pretty tough, and I think he deserves more to be praised or credited for protecting the business, and I always sort of felt bad for him because he got sort of thrown under the bus for doing nothing but defending the damn business, and they should have looked after him more and defended him more rather than we don't have anything more to do with him. And so I don't blame him whatsoever for being half pissed with kind of the way that they treated him after that.
And you, of course, brought Dynamite Kid to Stampede Wrestling. I have a few questions about him, but I just wanted to ask you, Jake the Snake mentioned when we interviewed him that Dynamite was roughing Brett up in their matches a lot in Stampede, and Jake said he found this quite amusing. Do you have any recollection that Dynamite?
Not really. As you might recall too, because you were in Stampede a bit later on, but the style tended to be a bit rugged, a bit solid or stiff or whatever you want to call it. So a few potatoes here and there, but it was sort of just the mindset up there with, it was a more kind of a solid style, and guys like Dynamite and some of the Japanese guys and Bad News and some of them were pretty solid, as they say. So I never ever perceived, I worked with Dynamite many a time, and we exchanged more than a few potatoes, but I never discerned that it was intentional, and we frankly liked the style. Dynamite was maybe a bit stiff, but at that time we were endeavoring to make people believe as they should be today. I don't think the fans want to know, not to digress, about sports entertainment and bullshit like that. They just want to go out and believe if you let them, make it look real. I don't need an effing sign, neon sign saying this is sports entertainment or, just let me believe. If I go to church, I don't want some a-hole standing outside and this is all bullshit and we really don't know what we're talking about, but put your money in the thing and buy into our bullshit, So wrestling fans, by that token, should be the same. If they want to believe, if they want to, hate some heel's guts or, invest their emotions in some baby face like Daniel Bryan, let them. Don't keep telling them, no, it's all a work. It's all screw that. Just let them believe in all this bullshit about, sports entertainment and it's being a work or whatever. It's been around for 100 years from what my dad said. And, let the fans form their own opinions. They don't need to be told or, but.
And you've told us this story off camera when we were doing the training in the dungeon, but there's a story that's been written about in several books where Dynamite Kid attacked you up in the Northwest Territories. Do you mind just telling a short version of that, the true version? Yeah,
it was kind of stupid. I'm on more than good terms now with Dynamite and them, but we had some kind of a abortion of a trip up to Yellowknife, which is about 2,000 miles north to Alaska or some bullshit like that. And I remember this trip was kind of preceded by one van breaking down, and there's about 18 guys in one vehicle, and the last 600 miles was gravel and all this other. And I think we had a show the preceding night in Yellowknife, and then we were supposed to drive back to this other Eskimo outlet called Hay River on the way back. And I think Dynamite and them maybe went into the bar and got plastered, or a whole bunch of them, and I had driven down the preceding night after the matches because I had to do radio interviews in the morning on the Hay River radio. And anyway, to make a long story short, show was supposed to start at about 7 or something like that, and by 7:30, the only wrestlers there were Bulldog Brown, his son, his supposed son or his nephew, Kerry Brown, and myself. And we had a pretty good house, about 1,500 people or something like that. So anyway, we're waiting, and we don't want to give them their money back. And so finally I worked with Kerry Brown. And I think we worked about 45 minutes, and I told Bulldog if the boys haven't arrived yet by 45 minutes or whatever, do some kind of an interference, and we'll shoot a spin-off angle and I'll work with you then. So that's what we did. So I had worked about 45 minutes with Kerry, and then Bulldog did something, and I shot an angle and said, I'll kick your ass and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I worked with Bulldog for about another 45 minutes, and finally I had somebody signal to me that they had arrived. So I've been working about 90 minutes. I come back to the dressing room, and the Faces dressing room, and I'm talking to, I think, Benoit. And I'm just saying, where the hell have you guys been, or what the hell's going on? The show was supposed to start at 7. It's like 9 o'clock or something now. And from out of the blue, I guess Dynamite had come in from behind and from the Heels dressing room or whatever, but I didn't even see it and just wham, and I got like hit in the side from behind and I think it dislocated my jaw. And then I think my brother Dean, who was a referee or something, he kind of, came in and I was like half dazed from the damn shot to the head. And then Dynamite was, drunk and belligerent and fuck you and all this. And that was sort of that. And then he later on, I made peace with him later on, but he told me that there is this other a-hole who's in the territory named Ricky Rice had supposedly been saying that I was laughing about how the Bulldogs must, they used to fly first class in WWE or some bullshit, and now they're riding 18 guys in one of Stu's broken down vans over 1,000 miles of gravel, and that I was making fun of them, which I wasn't. And even if I had been, it would have been, not knocking them or anything like that, and they had been
a joke on the road trip.
So I think, so it was mostly just shit disturbing, and so that was about that. It was a bit frustrating given that I just worked 90 minutes and get my damn jaw broken over some bullshit like that. But
and another guy that was pretty tough is your old tag team partner, Brian Pillman.
Yeah.
What was it like training him and being involved in that tag team, which was very popular at the time, Bad Company?
That was really, that was kind of really nice. I'd actually just come off, blown my knee out. So I was just torn my ACL and, and I'd been out for about 8 months, and there was an old friend of mine who was on the Calgary Stampeders named Stu Laird. And I used to see him at my brother-in-law BJ's gym downtown. He told me he had a guy who was, I think, the starting linebacker on the Stampeders at that time who was wanting to get into wrestling. Back in those days, if you had football players wanting to get into wrestling, it was usually after they had been cut or they're at the end of the line or it was off season. But this is right at, I think, second or third game into the season. Pillman was like the starting outside linebacker for the Stampeders. And so anyway, I told Stu, bring him down. I met with him at BJ's. And he was like all gung-ho to get into the wrestling and essentially walked away from being starting linebacker on the Stampeders to being a rookie wrestler. And he understood the ring psychology pretty good. He was really kind of big on, he had a bit of personality to him, and he was pretty dedicated. And one of the best things for me at that time is I had some pretty good other young guys that were starting, Owen and Chris Benoit and Jushin Liger and a couple of others. So it was good ambience, and they sort of, learned together, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, and Pillman kind of took off pretty quick. And his personality was, tailor-made for the business. He, in fact, kind of was the guy who taught Steve Austin most of his stuff. And if Pillman had been derailed by the car accident, which ultimately kind of, caused all his leg, and then I think that led to taking painkillers and, ultimately kind of killed him. But, he was sort of a cutting edge, guy that people would probably be talking about today in the same vein as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or Steve Austin.
What was that incident in Drumheller where someone supposedly blindside attacked him, and he ended up beating the hell out of him.
What it was about, there was this, I think you've been through Drumheller too,
Yeah.
but we used to have this running rib in the territory about this, magnificent statue of Stu. And whenever rookies were in the territory in the van for like an hour before we got there, and we'd be talking about the big statue of Stu, and it's kind of like a landmark, and you go to see this statue and whatever, and finally, he'd come around this bend in this Drumheller, which is famous for dinosaurs. It's kind of like, what its main claim to fame is, and you'd come around this bend, and all of a sudden there's this like 30-foot high Tyrannosaurus, and then all the boys would go together, you lazy bastard, and do a Stu impersonation. And so we did this rib on this idiot, new guy who just come in, kind of a musclehead wannabe named, I think his real name was Jeff Beltzner. He called himself Brick Bronski. And so anyway, we did this, and everyone had a laugh. And a couple of days later, I'm in the dressing room in Calgary, and I'm not sure what this idiot Beltzner, he came into the dressing room, and I heard he had been stirred up by, I'm not sure if it was Dynamite and whoever, but for some reason Dynamite and Pillman never liked each other too much either. But anyway, this idiot Beltzner came in, and Pillman and I are just coming into the dressing room, and he's got like Pillman had like a styrofoam coffee cup like that, and all of a sudden this Beltzner just came up and clocked Pillman and knocked him backwards into, there was a row of lockers against the wall, and I'm not sure if you've been in the dressing room in the pavilion, but so he knocked Pillman into the row of lockers, and he's sort of standing there admiring his worker. I think he figured he had mission accomplished or kicked Pillman's ass, and he could go and high-five Dynamite or whatever, and Pillman crashed into the lockers and got up, and Beltzner's standing there kind of smiling, and Pillman, who was pretty tough, legitimate NFL, CFL linebacker and all, speared him into the wall, flying tackle, and kind of bent him in half and beat the living shit out of him, to the point where I saw the bones coming out of his eye socket, his cheeks, and you see the white bones and the blood and the boom, 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 boom. And I think Pillman, when he had gone into when he speared him, he hit his hit his shoulder on the corner of the locker, separated his shoulder, Pillman, but he beat the living crap out of this guy, and the guy...
That was the end of his wrestling career.
And that sort of was unfortunate, but it kind of gave me some perspective about Pillman being pretty legit, because Pillman was only maybe 200. This guy's maybe 280. I later on heard some similar story. It wasn't as graphic or grotesque or violent as that with Pillman and Sid down in Atlanta.
With the squeegee.
Yeah, something like that.
You want to tell it that way?
I'm not even sure how that went. I just heard later on about that.
It ended up Sid got his butt kicked or something, and he pulled out a squeegee to defend himself, and everyone laughed or something.
Yeah, it kind of it's kind of like had the same effect as when Leon White got his ass kicked by Paul Orndorff or whatever, kind of deflated their image.
And I just have to ask this about Pillman, because I always found this story hilarious about his antics with Bill Kazmaier when Bill Kazmaier was sent down to you guys to train.
Well, it was kind of funny because Kazmaier half invited it too, but Kazmaier, for those people out there that don't necessarily know who he was, he was like multi-times world's strongest man, the world.
Yeah, I think he holds the record for winning it 6 times. Or
Yeah,
something.
for the powerlifting, bench press, deadlift, whatever, and
rock throwing or whatever they do.
all the other,
powerlifting.
and it was kind of funny though. Kazmaier's big idol, Kazmaier, I guess, went to University of Wisconsin, and his big hero was some center for the Pittsburgh Steelers named Mike Webster. So I remember this was almost laughable, but I remember Kazmaier, and we were riding down the van to Edmonton, and Pillman, who Kazmaier I don't think could stand it, but vice versa. Pillman always used to start these stories with, check this out, and Pillman had the raspy voice, and he's saying that I was sparring in the gym the other day, and down in Cincinnati, and this black guy with a gold tooth came in, and and I'm hitting the bag a bit, and this black guy comes up to me, and he said, "You're pretty good, man," or whatever, and says, "You want to go around or two?" And Pillman's saying, "Put up some scratch, Jack, maybe help out 10 G's or whatever." And, "Okay, man," whatever. And then Pillman said, "So he went to nail me, and I blocked him, and I cocked him, and next thing he's out cold, and all these people are come running up to me and saying, 'Do you know who you just knocked out?' And Pillman says, 'No,' and he says, 'That was Mike Tyson.'" So, and then Pillman says, "Check this out. I was down in the gym the other day, and I was, sparring a bit, and with some of the guys on the amateur wrestling mat, and this big misfit came in and started saying, 'You look like you can go a bit, man. You want to take me?' And Pillman, same story, put up some money, Jack, and all like this. And next thing I had him tapping out and screaming, and everyone comes running up and saying, 'Do you know who you just beat, man? Some jabroni, that was Bruce Baumgartner, my big gold medal.'" So he went on this whole story where he talked about, sprinting, and this black guy comes up and says, "Hey, man," in a really kind of effeminate voice, and, "You look like you can go a bit. You want to put up some money, John?" "That was Carl Lewis," So finally, the big culmination was, "Check this out, guys. When I was playing with the Bengals last year in Cincinnati, and I knocked this old fart on his ass so many times, he finally was begging to me, to the Steelers center, and saying, 'Please, man, you're making me look bad,' and all." And we all say, "Who was it?" And it's Mike fucking Webster, who was Kazmaier's ultimate hero. And Kazmaier went nuts and, "You're a fucking liar." And so that was kind of the... But
didn't he always call him by a different name too, or something like that? Or
Pillman always referred to Kazmaier as Quagmire, which is not complimentary. But funniest thing was years later, Pillman was in WCW at that time doing the Hollywood Blondes with Steve Austin, and he was getting over pretty good. He was half established, so somehow their Kazmaier got a tryout with WCW, and because Austin and Pillman were half stars, Kazmaier's kind of having to be pleasant and all, suck ass a bit. So Kazmaier buys him a drink and, "Tell me, man, when we were up in Calgary, who was responsible for all those ribs and all this shit?" And Pillman said he looked him square in the eye and said, "Bill, it was Ross." And like my brother Ross is about the most straightest, and Pillman said that Kazmaier was like smacking his fist and saying, "I knew it, that fucking asshole." He says, "If I ever see him, I'm gonna punch his fucking head in." I told him it was Ross. But That's kind of just funny.
And I'll just ask you quickly about your WWE appearances, because I know you've said it before that for a while you were actually going to have the role that Owen ultimately had as the evil Hart, but it didn't
I know I
work
went
out.
down there and we shot some angle or did the initial thing in Detroit at Auburn Hills where the Pistons played, where I was supposed to be sitting in the audience and Doink the Clown was gonna come out and throw the bucket of water on me. And then later on when they double teamed Brett Lawler and Doink, Matt Bourne, I was supposed to then hit the ring and have like a four-way, and that was supposed to ultimately lead to shooting some kind of an angle with Jerry and Matt Bourne or Doink for Survivor Series. And that's pretty much what we did. And then I got like rave reviews at the time. Everyone was saying, wow, that was the hottest thing on the whole SummerSlam card and all like that. And then I thought that was going to happen. And then it got all kind of screwed up, and in part because Matt Bourne got busted for something, and Lawler had some incident with some groupie in Louisville or something like that. But beyond that, I'm not sure if it was Brett or whatever, but I was supposed to be the one who was initially going to do this kind of half heel turn. It was kind of half-assed, to be quite honest. I thought the whole thing was a bit convoluted, but it should have been supposed to be the Hart family, which was Brett and Owen, me and Keith against, at that time, supposed to be Lawler's family. Then Lawler was taken out of it. Shawn Michaels was in it then, and I think Greg Valentine.
Some guy named Jeff Gaylord, too. Is that his real name?
Oh, I think Lawler and Doink were supposed to be the other two, and they ended up putting Jeff Gaylord and Barry Horowitz. And then they had the thing with Owen turning heel and all. And Owen was an awesome worker. I always thought he was never, really well suited to be playing a whiny little heel like they had him. It was really miscast him. Anyone who ever saw him in Calgary knew he was a phenomenal baby face. In fact, had a lot more charisma and athletic ability than Brett. And he was way more suited to being a face than Brett was. And anyone who ever saw him in Calgary knows that. But, so
You were the best man at Owen's wedding, too. Right?
Yeah, and he was best man at mine, too. But yeah, it pissed me off. I don't want to digress into talking about the Owen tragedy, but that whole thing was kind of a shame in so many ways because they never ever used him right anyway. And I heard they were maybe planning on starting to use him better after that. But he had been there for about 8 years. It was kind of like an earlier day version of Daniel Bryan, where he had all the charisma, all the athletic ability, everything else. And they used him in a steady succession of horseshit roles of high energy with Coco Beware and with Neidhart with those, checkerboard,
Balloon
ugly
pants.
lime green pants and all this other, none of which really did him, justice. If they just let him be like a Daniel Bryan or something like that, he would have been a phenomenal talent for him. And at the end, it was a shame that he got killed doing some horseshit stunt that had nothing to do with wrestling, just for some a-hole moron scriptwriter or some asshole wants somebody to come to the ring on a fucking cable as a bird or just bullshit. If you had a Wayne Gretzky or a Michael Jordan, dying doing some stupid thing like that, there'd be people saying, this is bullshit, it was just a shame,
And just a couple more questions. After all the hell Brett put your family through and you and Stu through after the Survivor Series incident, and there was a lot of tension with the family, and I know you had problems trying to bring Stu to Raw and stuff. Are you surprised that Brett ultimately rejoined the company?
Not really. It's complicated. I've made peace more or less with Brett, and I tried to see it from both sides, and I've been pretty outspoken in anything I've ever said about, that Montreal screw job and all. The two wrongs don't make a right, that Vince certainly didn't have honorable intentions, or he didn't distinguish himself in any positive way whatsoever in perpetrating an abortion like that. But at the same time, Brett, given what the business is, and it's obligatory when you're leaving a territory to drop the strap and all that other, Brett didn't really distinguish himself either. So I'd still say that right now, to either one of them, that ultimately the business, came out looking bad needlessly because of their, sort of agendas and all like that. So.
Do you think it was a good thing what they did with you guys at WrestleMania recently when they brought you in and Brett and the whole family?
I gave him, I told him, it's whatever you guys want to do. I'm not trying to tell you how to run your business. I remember when Michael Hayes and those guys ran the finish by us at that time and said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "Quite frankly, I think it sucks." I said, "You got about 10 Harts, my nephew Harry and Tyson Kidd and Natalia and Keith and me and Ross and Smith and Wayne and whoever." I said, "We're the baby faces and we're beating," and he got me as the referee, and we're the faces and we're beating the crap out of a 70-year-old non-wrestler, and we're supposed to be the faces. I said, "You guys do what you want. I'm at your disposal, but I said, I think it would have made a lot more sense if, maybe you guys get some sympathy on Brett and build it up to, some kind of a climax and go home." I said, "I don't think you need the whole Hart family out here aiding and abetting the best there is,
Right.
And I still felt that way, and I don't know what the point of that whole thing was. It didn't really result in any spin-off or anything like that when it could have and maybe should have, But.
And what do you think of Tyson Kidd's injury that he suffered recently?
That's too bad. It's in a microcosm. It's sort of reflective of some of the insanity of this wrestling business. Too many guys getting hurt, doing stuff that need not be done. You've been down in the dungeon. You've been around. A big part of the whole thing is protecting each other and kind of endeavoring to avoid injuries and not being careless. And so it's too bad. It's, I guess, a bonus that he's not paralyzed, but it's a shame that his career's ended because of it.
Are you happy for Natalia being one of her main, pretty much her main trainer before she went to WWE, on her success?
Yeah, I'm glad she's had some success. I think the whole Divas thing's, I'm not sure if they know what the hell they're doing, or they're coming or going. They're not sure if they want to be athletes or glorified strippers or what the hell, I think, frankly, my own estimation, divas and dwarfs should be used once in a while, not every damn card. They used to be a novelty, and I think if you're endeavoring to make people take them seriously, focus less on the tits and ass and more on the wrestling, less on the high spots, more on the wrestling, and I think that goes for the whole business, where there's too much emphasis on high spots and gimmicks and talking on the mic, and you need to go back to middle of the road in order to reestablish the fan base, which is a big reason why UFC has succeeded, if only because people are allowed to buy into the notion that it might be a shooter for real, and wrestling shouldn't be losing sight of that.
And for the last group of people that were trained in the dungeon that are still pretty much fairly active today, would you say that would be Davey's son, Harry, TJ?
It was frustrating, because you were down there. There was a lot of guys in there that had really good potential. Could have been, should have. They could have been everything that TJ was. Harry was exceptional, and it pissed me off. WWE didn't use him anywhere near to his capability, but there was a whole bunch of guys, including Rick Victor, as you know, but a lot of other guys that were, as good as damn near anyone I've seen come up from NXT. Guys like yourself and others that had the size, the look, the amateur background, pretty good facials, all of that. You would know, because you saw those guys. Those were among the best prospects, everything that Dwayne Johnson was, or Kofi Kingston, or, any of the comparable to any of them. And it's sort of sad. And so, it sort of bothered me that, mostly because of the dynamics of the business, those guys never, anyone listening here probably don't know who the hell any of them are. Like, I may think I'm dreaming or bullshitting or something. So it's sad, the JP had lots of charisma, Hotshot Johnny Devine or whatever he called himself. So it's kind of sad in another time and place. If those guys had been coming up back in the 80s when I was breaking in Dynamite,
there was more places to
Davey,
go.
or, they had come up in the Pillman, Owen, Benoit era. I have no doubt those guys would have been, guys everyone's talking about today, like in the same vein as they're talking about a Davey Boy or a Pillman or an Owen, so.
And is there anything you'd like to plug where we can follow you and you have your Heartbeat Radio podcast?
Yeah, I think it's Heartbeat Radio on pwpnation.com, and I do like a written thing called Heart Murmurs, and I think it's same kind of thing, PWP Nation, and but yeah, I'd like to thank you too, Devin, for business needs more people that are old school, that are trying to keep that flickering flame burning. And I'd like to throw the gauntlet down to Vince and Hunter and all those guys to resow some seeds at the grassroots, get back to wrestling, cut back on the bullshit, less tits and ass and less idiots yakking on the mic for half an hour and all this other horse shit, and go back to wrestling. And easier said than done. It takes longer to turn out a wrestler than some asshole masquerading as a wrestler who talks and blows smoke up sphincters and all that other bullshit.
And I know we have a lot of old Stampede Wrestling fans that watch this channel, so is there anything to close off that you'd like to say to your fans that may have followed you in Stampede Wrestling?
I'm appreciative, as my dad was and my brothers are, for their support. I've always said if you don't have the fans, and you don't have anything in this business, and too often the fans are ignored or kind of left out of the equation. And so I'd like to thank the fans, and I'm hoping that fans start getting treated with more respect, and don't underestimate their intelligence. Just keep it pretty simple. It's not that complicated, and long live the wrestling business.
All right, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.